We have torn down a lot of bad EcoBoost engines on this channel. In fact, if you search the channel for EcoBoost, you'll see that I've got most of them covered. But I did say most of them, which means there are some outliers that I haven't been able to get my hands on. And today we get to take another one off of that list with this. This is the 2.3 liter EcoBoost out of a 2019 Ford Ranger. This has just over 100,000 miles on it, which seems a little young to be on my stand waiting for a dissection, but I think the national average is 15 to 20,000 miles a year, and this is 5 years old, which is kind of hard to imagine. And it's not that crazy to think one of these would have failed. But these engines used are kind of expensive, and usually that means that there's a demand, and I don't know if people are swapping these into something else, or maybe they need them for replacement. Not all 2.3 liter EcoBoost are the same. Whether it's from a Bronco or a Ranger, a Mustang, or even a Focus RS, they all are closely related. They all share some components, but of course Ford had to change things based on application, so the engines have differences. This version out of the Ranger produces 270 horsepower and 310 foot-pounds of torque. It's a lot of power and a lot of torque, especially out of an all-aluminum four-cylinder, and that's in factory form. But I think their goal there was to make something that no one would ever modify, no one would ever tune them or put a downpipe on them, turn the boost up. That would never happen, not in this country. No, not at all. And I'm sure you guys have already noticed that this engine is kind of stripped already. There's no turbocharger, there's no intake manifold. Unfortunately, I'm not really in the control of how I get these engines. I have to take them or leave them, essentially. But it was really cheap because I had to dig it out of a scrap bin, which is why, if you notice, once you see the top of this engine, there's a little bit of damage up there. Sorry. So the very first thing I'd like to do is see if this engine turns over. It does, and it feels like it has compression. But it's making some noises. Hold on. Ooh. Uncle Rodney? Is that you? Something's loose in there, and that's not good. It also feels like I'm fighting some rust. This engine was in a scrap bin that was outside, so there may be some rust in this engine. Let's take a look down these tiny little intake ports. And I say they're tiny, that's because there's one per valve. That's grody looking. Definitely had some moisture in it. Not too much carbon buildup. It's not perfect. It's getting worse as I get further back. What is going on in that one? I think it's just open. Yeah, those are just open. Oh, ran out of cylinders. Well, there's a little bit of damage up here, as I mentioned earlier. It had a Pentastar sitting on top of it. So let's get these coils out so we can get the plugs out. Oh, water came out of that one. And that one. Now we'll get the plugs out. Lots of water. So there's good and bad here. The good, nothing's bent or smashed or destroyed. I don't see any signs of malice in the combustion palace, but they're all wet, which means this engine is full of water. Now that the plugs are out of it, let's see how it turns over with no resistance. I hear noises. Not good. Next, we're going to take a moment and strip some of this stuff off the outside of the engine, the EGR valve, EGR cooler, this coolant pipe. Let's just get it all out of the way. I don't really know what it takes to get all this stuff off. We're just going to zip bolts off until the parts fall off. Hey, the EGR pipe's off. Does this come off? Does this come out? There's more bolts. Did that do anything? Okay, now we can... It's time for blue already. Now we have this high pressure fuel line. And we can get this bracket out of the way, I think. I thought. This is the mount for the high pressure fuel pump, and I think it comes out pretty easily. Oh, I think I need to take that 8mm out. Much easier. Next, it's time to remove the valve cover. As always, we always got to start in the front. Let's see, will this just lift up? That would be nice. Oh, who am I kidding? Blue. This will be our first look inside of this thing to see what the maintenance looks like. As a matter of fact, I've already looked at the Carfax and there's some holes. Not literally. Well, definitely has a few signs of moisture in here, some broken plastic. That all looks brand new. It looks like brand new phasers, brand new chain.
Someone's been here.
Overall, there's not a ton of varnish in here. There's some, and it actually looks like someone may have tried to clean some of this out. There's definitely some pretty sludgy deposits in there, but where the deposits aren't, it's very clean. So maybe they ran some engine flush through here, which I suppose could cause problems if they get enough of that junk loosened up at once. But here's the brand new phasers, cam gears. Looks like a brand new chain. And if you look closely, it looks like someone's been in here before. The surface of this looks like it's been hit with a roll-lock disc. Yeah, this has definitely been off. Matter of fact, the Carfax at 104,000 miles shows that it has a turbo, timing chain, all of that stuff replaced. And that was likely right before the engine developed a problem. Maybe it created it. So I just took a look and it looks like it's in time. The slot on the camshafts is in the right location. And assuming the crank pulley was installed correct, I think that's correct as well. The only way to find out is to peel this all apart, which we're going to do that next. We're going to take the harmonic balancer off. We'll get the bent water pump pulley out of the way. We'll get this timing cover off, and then we can really tell. Well, you can see the timing marks right there. First, the crank bolt. And of course, they're not keyed. Now, the idler and a few other 10mm headed bolts. What the what? That was uncalled for. Poor water pump pulley. Never stood a chance. Now we have just a few 8mm bolts. And that one's bent. Now we just have a few of these 13s. Now let's see how well this thing is glued on. Oh, someone did a great job. Look at the inside of this. Yikes. So the upper part doesn't look too bad, but if you look in the crevasses in this area, they're filled with oil debris. Lots of oil varnish, lots of sludge. And then whoever worked on it looks like they just used new RTV on top of the old RTV. The work of a true craftsman. Well, let's take a look-see. Obviously, our phasers look brand new. The chain also looks brand new. But the guides, I think I saw a date code of 19 right there. Those appear to be original. It looks like it's a new tensioner, maybe. There's tool marks on it. So obviously it's been off, and it's on the Carfax, so I hope they replaced it. But if you look at the sheer volume of sealant and the way everything was applied, definitely, hopefully unrelated to what caused this engine to fail. The next thing I'm going to do is what I do on all of this style of engine, is I'm going to crack the cam gears loose so that I can show you the infinitely variable timing that these engines can have. Ah, that was a little more than loose. Nope, too much. Ah. Ah. Also too much. Not the best impact for control. We're going to kind of do that. And let's see if these do the same thing as their predecessor. Sure do. We can't really turn it over that easily, but the crank isn't keyed and the cams aren't keyed. And I personally don't like that, but I know that there's a lot of reasons for that, and it usually cost, but it just makes you have to buy special tools for the DIYer. And if you're a shop, you should probably have those tools, and it's not a big deal. Now we can peel the rails off. We'll start with this tensioner. Ooh, that was violent. Is this going to hurt me? No. Perfect. It's got a little snap ring to catch it, so I can't shoot it across the shop. So one interesting thing is, well, do you remember how I said that the Carfax says that this repair shop replaced the timing chain guide and tensioner? Well, we know the guides are not new. And then there is a 2018 year code, a date code on the actual tensioner. Let me get this other rail off. Maybe this one's been replaced. This is definitely, look at all the sludge on the back of that. They didn't replace anything but the chain and these. Maybe it was a clerical error and they just mentioned that. I'm sure they would never have charged a customer for something they didn't do. Look at all that sludge on the back of that. This, I don't think has ever been off. Yikes. Here are those rails. That's the side that you could see. And this is the sludgy side that you could not. And you can see there's a bunch of sludge in there. These are definitely original. This engine was clearly ill-maintained. That doesn't just happen. That happens from extended oil change intervals. That's not good. Happy birthday to the ground! Now we can get the timing chain off. Look at that brand new chain. That's excellent. It's not often we get new chains on this channel. We can just spin them. Perfect. The next thing I'm going to do is remove the variable cam timing solenoids. Sometimes, rarely as of late, they will collect bearing material if it's suspended in the oil. Seems that has been true in the past, just not lately. Oh. Well, there's some junk on them. Now, I can't really tell that that's metal, at least not from this vantage point. Yeah, there's some metal there. It looks like metal and sludge. And that was in the oil. If it was in the oil, that means that that junk went through the entire oiling circuit. And also those look like they're aftermarket replacements, like they were chasing a problem. Next, I need to remove the high pressure fuel pump bracket. And now we can finally crap these cam caps off.
Now we can zippy-doo-dah these off.
Let's take a peek. A little bit of damage on that journal. These look to be okay, but you can definitely tell there's still a ton of sludge. In fact, if you look down in there, you can barely see what size head bolt that is. I know these are probably a T55. Look at that one, it's completely plugged. Wait, what is down in there? There's something down there. What is that? Something is broken in there. We're going to have to retrieve that. Let's just first look at the rest of this. It doesn't look good. And I have this distinct smell of like an engine flush type. Look at the sludge buildup there on that bolt. This poor engine. Take a look at these camshafts. This one's got some pretty decent wear. They're not super destroyed. At least this one isn't. And then if you look at the caps, I would say that's better than I expected when I first saw underneath the valve cover. It's definitely some wear, but it's not totally trashed. Look at this cam. That's a little rough there. I really want to pay attention to the fuel pump driving lobe, because that is where we found that random whatever that is. That's some pretty interesting wear and damage. Outside of that, they look okay. If you look down in there, there's more chunks of it. That's substantial, whatever that is. Let's see if we can pull that out. Well, it's magnetic. Let's see if we can get the rest of this out. We'll set that right there. I said we'll set that right there. Let's move this. Oh, I heard that. What is this? So here are those shards. Focus. RS. As you can see, this one's pretty cracked up. It almost looks like it could be part of the roller for the lifter for that high pressure fuel pump. But how would that even happen? I am perplexed. Before we can pull the head off, I need to remove this coolant pipe. Before I try to get these head bolts out, I need to get the goo out of the sludge out of these head bolts. Look at that. Yummy. I'm going to do this to all of them so that we can get these head bolts out without stripping a single one. One last thing before we crank the head bolts loose, I want to make sure there's nothing that's going to get us stuck harness wise. And there is. Got a knock sensor here. One of these locking tabs that everyone loves so much. Okay, anything else that's going to create a problem besides this other knock sensor? Okay, now we're ready to crack the head bolts loose. Hopefully these are cleaned out enough. All right, at this point, I think this will just lift off. I hope. Oh, yes. Well, it's wet. It's definitely been wet. Let's take a look at these pistons. This one doesn't have a ton of carbon on it. It looks pretty clean. A lot cleaner than that one. Cleaner than that one, and for sure cleaner than that. So I don't know what happened here. If maybe it got fuel in it and it cleaned it, or maybe there's another problem. I don't see any major signs of issues with the deck of the block. That all looks okay. Kind of expected this to be a closed deck. I don't know why. But I don't see any damage to the tops of pistons. Now we need to do our science, test the pistons. I mean, really, we're testing the rods here. Uh-oh, that one was loud. Why was that one loud? Let's get the crank bolt and see if we can turn it over and find out why that one made more noise. All right, so now these are on the downstroke. Let's see, can we do this? Yep, that's a problem. So we've got a problem with likely number 2 bearing. You can hear it. Ooh, that one's worse. That moved a lot. All right, watch how much this will move. That's a lot. It's a good, I would say, whatever the thickness of 2 rod bearings, that's how much that moves. One other thing to mention, this is an oil drain from the head. Look at all that goo. Why did I touch that? All right, let's peel the head gasket. It's stuck on the head still. Yee. Head gasket looks to be pretty good. I don't see any major issues there. Nothing looks breached. And the cylinder head, we're starting at the back, which shouldn't do, but we are. I don't really see any major issues. Obviously, it's been wet. There's moisture in here. What's interesting is it doesn't look like the pistons, well, I take that back. I definitely think right here, let me get something to clean this off with. Here, we need a control, so we'll wipe this one, and then we'll wipe this one. And as you can see, this one's got some shiny spots in it, and this one doesn't. So what I think happened is due to an extra long connecting, no rod bearings left in cylinder 1, it allowed the rod and piston to travel up and the piston kissed the head. But I think because of the design of the combustion chamber and the piston, it doesn't make a whole ton of contact, certainly not enough to shatter the piston unless someone's trying something ridiculous. Now, before we roll this thing over, we need to remove our friend,
the water pump.
Be really careful here. And really, I don't want to do any damage to the block. I'm hoping the block's okay. Actually, it looks like that part unbolts from the engine. We're getting there. Just got to get it past the O-ring. Oh, coolant was still in there. So this really doesn't turn that well. But I suspect that's not because... Oh, see, now we're good. See, it fixed itself. It's perfect. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Now it's time to roll this thing over and drain all the sauce. See what's in here. That's pretty gross looking. Now it's time to unbolt the oil pan. Oh, someone put a whole bunch of effort into this. Come on, man. These have a torque spec. Okay, I guess I'm going to use the air. However low my battery may be, there is no excuse for oil pan bolts being that tight. Well, I can tell you something you already know. By the application of RTV and the presence of what was likely a roll-lock disc to get this cleaned,
somebody's been here.
Oh. Well. Yeah, someone's been in here trying to clean some stuff up, I can tell you. Well, let's shed some light on this. Someone's been in here cleaning around, but we've got some bearing chunks in there. Look at all this. I think this had lots of engine flush run through it. I think that's what we're looking at here. It's a mixture of oil, water, some oil, and some engine flush. And rod bearings. Not a match made in heaven. And more looks like it's been attempted to be cleaned out. See what happens when an engine's very sludgy and then all at one time you try to get this thing cleaned out. That sludge finds its way into this location, which is the pickup, which there's a few chunks of stuff in there. I bet that they made an effort to clean that out as well. But it can cause a lot of damage. Also, there's some strange fastener that I have never seen before. I'm sure you guys, this is like on your lawnmower and I'm just living in a cave. It's like a 3-pointed security. I bet I can hammer a socket onto it, is what I'm saying. But I don't think I'm going to take that apart. I think what we're just going to do is take the oil pump side of this apart. Look at the volume of sludge in this thing. This is gross. This engine was clearly let down by its owner. Start unbolting some of this stuff. See what it's going to take to get that stuff off. Well, that wasn't too bad. What about this? Well, that I can just swivel out of the way. The next thing we're going to do is remove the balance cartridge, which has the oil pump attached to it. It looks like this has been off before. I see tool marks on this. Definitely. Some of those were loose, some of those were fine, some of those were too tight. This should lift right off. Let's take this apart. Just a couple gentle taps. There's the gear that drives the oil pump, and there's our, that does not move very freely. I bet there's a bunch of junk in there. Unfortunately, I don't have the tool to get that apart. But I think we can take this apart. Oh, look at all that sludge. Yikes. My glove's destroyed. I don't know if I can get this apart, guys. I would never sell this oil pump anyway, so I don't really care if I put some scratches in it. This is not really working. What am I missing? Do I have to take this off? That's not a thing. What am I missing? This is kind of a letdown. I know you guys want to see the inside of it. I want to see the inside of it. I want to know. There's a spring in there. What are you made out of? I think it has something to do with this and this. And I don't know how that comes off. I don't think that's the Torx. I give up, guys. I'm sorry. We got it off of this, but it didn't really tell us much. Well, that was a huge letdown. I'm sorry, guys. Let's turn this over and see if we can figure out where the problem is. That can't be it. That's normal. Oh, so that one's bad. You can see, look how hot that got. It also doesn't turn over that well. There's some rust in the cylinders. And then this one looks discolored too. There's a little bit of play. It's not nearly like this one here. Uncle Rodney's very ready to make an exit. And I bet if it ran much longer, it would have. All right. Now, before we get the rods and pistons out, I'm actually going to remove this main cap girdle. It's just going to make things a lot easier. I'm sure this won't just lift up, so let's get blue. That's a secret spot to get those cracked loose. Let's get this out of the way. This is super gross. Okay, now we can easily see all 4 rod caps, and once those are off, the crank will just lift right out. We're going to start off with 1 and 4. All right, notice how that didn't really make any noise. Let's see what 4 sounds like. Much different. Those had literally no tension on them, and these feel torqued down the way they're supposed to be. And I noticed when I just pulled this one out, the oil substance that came out of that was more of like an engine flush than it was actually oil or sludge. Ooh, bad. Now I can push number 1 and 4 out. Coincidentally, my piston testing tool also removes them. And that's why there's a pan there. And let's rotate it for the 2 and 3 cylinder. Okay. Now we can pluck the crankshaft out, I hope. This plate is not a problem. Let's look at the bearings first. There's cylinder 1. Just imagine what they would look like because it's not present. Well, it kind of is. I'll show you in a minute. There's cylinder 2. That's pretty rough. This one was knocking too. There's cylinder 3 and cylinder 4. Now, if I pulled an engine apart and this was the worst bearing, I would put a full set of bearings in it because that is bad. But that's the best one. Then we go on to the rods, and of course, because this bearing is destroyed, there's a ton of heat in this cylinder. I bet you this is egg-shaped. That rod is junk. It's turned that color, that heat turned that color. Same with this, to a degree, not quite as bad as cylinder 1. Cylinder 3 and 4 look like they have pretty good shaped connecting rods. The piston from knocking around, cylinder 1 has quite a bit of wear on the skirt. We did clean these off with some brake clean. Didn't see any damage to the face of the piston, which is surprising considering how much movement there was. But I guess because of the engine design, it doesn't allow the piston to hit the head that hard. And then cylinders 3 and 4 look okay. I don't know that these are going to have any value, but hey, if you want some of this stuff for your desk, there you go. That one has a ton of carbon on it. Now we'll look at the main bearings. They're also pretty tore up. Look at that. Not good. So now we get to the crankshaft. So there's the main journal number 1. And if you look closely, there's actually a bearing. There's actually a bearing there. It's paper thin. I'm not going to attempt. Yes, I am. I'm going to attempt to get that off. Let's see. It is not going to happen. I know I'm scratching the crankshaft, and I know you guys are mad about it. But that is paper thin. I'd have to peel that off. It's probably welded to the crankshaft. As you can see, look at all the heat discoloring here. And that one's pretty torn up too. Main journal's fared okay. That one's got a little damage. Ford cranks are super cheap, so anytime I get a Ford crank, unless it's something very special and there's any bit of damage, they usually end up in the scrap bin. And there's a good idea of what the inside of this engine looked like. This was unable to be reached by any kind of cleaning or spraying, and that's a ton of sludge. This has a ton of built up sludge on it. This poor engine. Let's take a look at these bores. So that one, because that piston was knocking around, it did quite a bit of damage to the cylinder wall. But that's okay because these all have some rust pitting. I think this block could be saved. I don't know if there's any value to it, but I think it could be saved. I don't know if it's machine work or sleeves that would save it, but we'll have to look into it because I hate to throw something away someone can use. Not for, what, 60-something cents a pound? What we saw here today is in no way a reflection of how good or bad these engines are. I see a lot of comments in my videos that blame an engine's failure on the manufacturer, and I'm not here to tell you that all engines are great because every manufacturer can make a great engine, and many of them can make some pretty terrible crap, putting it bluntly. However, given the same set of circumstances that this engine went through, there aren't many engines, at least modern engines, that would have come out the other side shining like a diamond and in perfect health. That amount of sludge is bad for all engines, and especially late model engines, tons of tiny oil passages. It was clear that they were chasing problems with this. In fact, I'm going to go through the maintenance history with you guys at the same time so that you can get an idea of what this vehicle went through. So this engine was 104,000 miles when the major service happened, but this vehicle had its first oil change at 2,900 miles. That's excellent. And again at 5,300 miles. That's awesome. Another one at 10.5, then 17.8. So that's 7,200 miles. Not sure what the interval. And then the next oil change is at 25.5. So another 8,000 miles, 7,800 miles, and then 32. So we're on like about every 7,000 mile interval. I'm not saying that that's not the oil change interval. 37, 43, 50, and then it was sold to the next owner. And then a whole bunch of time goes by. Wow, okay, so here is where I think the problem happened. So the second owner purchased it in 23, and between 5/2 of 23 when the title was issued and 6/25, there was no maintenance history. Did they never change the oil? Did this go 50,000 miles? Or let's see, what was the last miles on that? 52 to 104. And the 104-mile service, that 1,000-mile service, was done at a local independent shop. And it says, oil and filter changed, turbocharger replaced or repaired. That's a sign of being clogged and failing. Timing chain tensioner guide replaced. We know some of that's alive. Valve cover gasket replaced. Antifreeze coolant flushed and changed. That's the last record I have of that. But that's from 6/25 of 24. So that's just a month and a half ago. No, a month ago. That's just over a month ago at this point. They did all that work, and the engine failed. Now, there's two schools of thought here. I got mad seeing new parts in an engine that was this sludgy, because if I were running a shop or I were a tech, and I pulled something apart for clattering, or maybe it had cam timing related failure or codes, you pull the solenoids out, they're full of junk, and then you got the valve cover off, it looks super sludgy. The last thing you want to do is waste customers' money and time. And it's a try. At best, it's a gamble. Now, what could have happened is they could have approached the customer and said, hey, we can try to clean this up, or we can replace your engine. But you may end up replacing your engine anyway. Either way, it needs a chain and phasers, and we're going to charge you for guides and not replace the guides. And maybe that didn't happen. That's just what it looks like on the Carfax. However, if I saw this thing come in, there's no way I would put chains and phasers in an engine that looked that way. There's no chance that this engine had to survive any kind of duration from that point. And here we are at the end of July, towards the end of July, a month after that service, and the bad engine is already dismantled on my stand, and hopefully this vehicle is back on the road, and hopefully they learned something. You have to change your oil. That doesn't mean they didn't change it. It just means that there weren't records of it. It kind of looks like they didn't change it, doesn't it? $50K. Way too far for oil changes. I know there's some oil manufacturers that tout that you can go once a year or 20,000 miles, and I would just, oil's always cheaper than engines, guys. So if you'd like to buy any parts out of this engine, which there are some good parts, maybe the block, the oil pan, cylinder head might be okay, or if you want something for your desk, or if you'd like to buy any parts off of anything else I've torn down, or out of this 5-speed manual 2500 4-wheel drive Hemi-powered Ram. It's kind of a rare truck. I jumped on it because it was a stick. I'm going to leave our email in the video description. You can also go to Importapart.com and peruse our inventory. If you find something on the website that you like that you can add to your cart, you can use the I Do Cars coupon code, which will save you 10% off of anything you can add to your cart. Site-wide, no exceptions. Cheap plug, shameless plug. I'm sorry, guys. Really hope you enjoyed this video. As always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.